All right, y'all, we're here to discuss the final road to ICD-10. Now, some major issues and concerns that we're having is do or don't transition V57.89. The fact that we should be using V57.89 as our 67 until October 30th of 2015. After October 1st, 2015, we need to be using the real reason that the resident is in the nursing home as our 67. We are using the exact same mapping and coding concept that we are currently doing in ICD-9. Can we transition any of the V codes? Should we use therapy diagnoses as our main diagnosis? What will we do because V57.89 is not to be transitioned, but we are using it as our admit diagnosis? How many diagnoses can I map? Now, these are some of the questions and concerns that I've been getting. Do not transition V57.89. You all in ICD-10 use the real reason that the resident is admitted to the nursing home as your 67. You will notice if you do decide to map V57.89, you will get a denial. It should not be mapped on your list. This is not a valid reason in ICD-10. We must follow the proper coding guidelines, and in the coding guidelines, we will not use that therapy code as our 67, but we will be using the real reason that the resident is in the nursing home. After October 1st, 2015, use the real reason that the resident is in the nursing home. Now, presently, you know we use those aftercare V codes when there is an injury because the resident is being treated in the subsequent phase of care when they're admitted to us. The resident may be admitted for a healing fracture of the right tibial shaft. Currently, in our ICD-9 coding process, we would code V57.89 because of course they're going to get therapy, and we would code V54.16 for the aftercare of that fracture of the lower leg. Now, this is what we currently do, but when ICD-10 comes forth, the resident comes from the hospital, they will have a code listed. Their primary diagnosis will probably be like S82.25-1A for the initial encounter of that tibia fracture. And what we will do is we will list S82.25-1D for the subsequent, or what we know it to be, the aftercare phase of care. Now, this is how we're going to list instead of using that V57.89 or even those traumatic V codes. We won't use trauma codes anymore as V codes. We're going to use the real code, and we're going to change our 7-digit character to D. The difference in digits, okay, you all remember from our training, the extension in the 7-digit place for A is for the initial encounter. The D is for the subsequent encounter. And you all remember the aftercare Z codes should not be used for aftercare for injuries. For aftercare of an injury, assign the acute injury code with the 7th character of D. This is the coding guidelines, you all. This is for the subsequent encounter. Don't use V57.89. Do not use V54 for those traumatic fractures anymore. We're going to use the hospital's code. Also remember, if that patient decides that they don't want to do therapy and they sit there and they get a contracture, this is called a late effects right now in ICD-10, but in ICD-9, but in ICD-10 it's going to be called a sequela, and we will change the D that we changed from that code, that previous code, to an S, because now they have a contracture. We will code the contracture first, and then we will code that old S code with a S at the end for that sequela as the secondary diagnosis. Do not transition. I can't say that enough, y'all. Do not transition. That means do not map V57.89 because you're going to get a denial. That means this is absolutely correct. V57.89 should not be used in ICD-10. We will be using the actual reason that the resident came into the facility as our 67. This is why I have been sending out emails to you all. Do not transition V57.89. For example, if a resident came in for a hip fracture, let's say, and we're going to therapy them right now, if it was before October 1st, we would use V57.89. This is still our coding concept until the last day we'll be doing this is September 30th, 2015. Now, after September 30th on October 1st, we will no longer do this, but until September 30th, we should be doing this still, and that is coding V57.89 as our 67 and V54.13 as our aftercare of that fracture code. Now, after October 1st of 2015, we would code a code like S72.064D for that fracture and not use a therapy code with it. So that's going to be our primary diagnosis. We are using the same mapping and coding concept right now. We need to be making sure, you all, that the real reason that the resident is here should be our 67 going forth in ICD-10. And some people want to know, well, what if I have multiple diagnoses that are keeping that resident here? Y'all know this is up to subjection, and that's why I said mapping should be done in the morning meeting, and I've been saying that since day one. What is the most labor-intensive diagnosis? What is causing us to do the most labor? What is causing us to have to take care of that patient the most? That should always be mapped first. What to do when the resident comes in for therapy, but there is not an injury. You all know when it comes to part A, the acute diagnoses have to always be listed first, and chronic diagnoses are listed first when it comes to Medicaid. In saying that, you know, we don't code codes like hypertension. Non-specific hypertension should not be listed as our 67 on Medicare, but hypertension with renal manifestations can be listed as our 67 on our right now in ICD-9 as well as ICD-10. So whatever the reason, pneumonias, UTIs, whatever is keeping that patient in our nursing home, that has to be our 67. Strokes, late effects of strokes, those are our 67 codes, you all. We have diagnoses that we can code. We have just got to list them first. We should still be using V57.89 as our 67 until October 30th, 2015, you all. Use V57.89 until September 30th, because if you don't, you're going to mess your billing up. Don't mess your billing up. Use V57.89 until October 30th. It is the same concept that we're doing right now, you all. Y'all know if halfway through the month V57.89 should resolve, we can't take it off that diagnosis list until the end of the month because it's going to mess the billing up. Same concept. If you decide today, being October the 24th, that you want to take V57.89 off and you submit for billing, you know it's going to come off your list. You're going to mess your billing up. Don't mess your billing up now. You're going to have some people mad at you, and we don't want to lose the revenue, you all. So make sure we're still adhering to that concept. Don't mess your billing up. Don't resolve. If you have to resolve V57.89, wait until September 30th. Why? Can any V codes be transitioned? Why, yes. Y'all know we have other codes like therapeutic drug management, those status post pacemaker codes, attention to tracheostomy, attention to PEG tubes, encounter for dialysis codes. Those codes, those aren't trauma codes. We can use those codes. We can transition those codes over in ICD-10. So we can transition those codes over. Do not transition the trauma codes over. Remember those fracture codes? Do not transition those codes over. Those aftercare for fracture codes, don't transition those codes over. You're going to get, you're not going to be in proper coding compliance if you do that. So, but these codes, these V codes, yes, V codes can be transitioned over. It's just the ones that we're going to do for therapeutic drug management, those status post codes, attention to codes, encounter for codes. All of those codes can be transitioned over. Just don't code those that V57.89 or those other trauma aftercare for fracture codes, because we will be using the exact code that the hospital used. The only difference is we're going to change that 7-digit character from an A to a D. Should we use therapy codes diagnosis as our main diagnosis? Y'all know better. No, no, no. This is not going to change. We don't do it now. We're not going to do it in 10. Please remember, therapy uses treatment diagnoses, which are signs and symptoms in most cases, and we use definitive medical diagnoses. The coding guidelines specifically warn against using signs and symptoms that are integral to a disease process. This is why we have to be so careful when we are listing those treatment diagnoses on our resident list, because we could be doing what is called unbundling a code. If we map that medical diagnosis and we map a therapy treatment diagnosis that is integral to that medical diagnosis. An example, if we code pneumonia and then we code cough, and that cough is due to that pneumonia, well, y'all know pneumonia is a disease or an illness of the lungs. Well, your body's automatically designed to cough to try to get whatever is up out. So therefore, you should not be coding a cough that is integral to that pneumonia. This is fraud, 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 you all. Be careful. Be very, very careful. We don't want the OIG coming in and examining us due to any kind of fraudulent coding processes. Be careful. This is why I'm so adamant when I say, y'all, don't put those diagnoses on the list. But if you just feel you have to, do not map them, because as long as you don't map them, they won't go through and be put on a claim. But do not map them. Do not map those. What do we do, because V57.89 is not to be transitioned, but we're using it currently as our admit diagnosis? Y'all, more information to come. I've got to have a meeting on this one. There are so many ways we can go about this, but I want to make sure everybody's on one accord when it comes to this process. So there's more information to come on this one. How many diagnoses can I map? The HIPAA 510 rule says that every healthcare establishment has to have some type of electronic health records. So the electronic health records form now has 9 slots that you can list diagnoses on. So we have the ability to safely code up to 9 different slots when it comes to our diagnoses now. All right, you all, if you have any questions or concern, please shoot me an email. All right, have a good night.